All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Jake Fletcher Show. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up, a like, smash the subscribe button, follow, share, whatever it is on the platform that you're listening to. Any type of engagement, or if you can leave a review for us, it really helps the channel, helps the podcast, and I very much appreciate it. So today I am basically freestyling this one because it's a topic I've been thinking about. You know, sometimes when I do these podcasts, I have a little bit of some things, some thoughts kind of pre-prepared, and sometimes I just kind of flow with it when I'm doing a podcast by myself versus doing an interview. Usually interviews, I have questions lined up. But what I want to talk about today is essentially society's propensity to gaslight us into thinking that any type of acknowledgement whatsoever of any type of pain or hurt or weaknesses that we might have is in fact complaining, and that you should not complain. So want to explore a little bit why society has gaslighted? We've been gaslighted by society into just accepting this paradigm where any type of commentary about ourselves, such as what I mentioned, is seen as complaining. And you don't want to complain, right? And want to also explore the reality that it's okay to acknowledge that sometimes we're hurting, sometimes we're in pain, physical, emotional, spiritual, whatever it is. And sometimes we just need to let that out. If somebody can be a shoulder for us to lean on or an ear to listen to us, it can be very beneficial for us. But I'll start it off by saying this. Have you ever noticed that if you ask somebody or you see somebody be asked a question along the lines of, hey, what do you think is frustrating about this? Or what do you think is frustrating about that? X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. You may notice that person will just go full off on a tangent about everything that frustrates them about whatever that given topic is. Now, the reason for this is because the person asking the question has given them tacit approval to unload all of what might be seen as complaining about something. And we're taught by society and from a very young age not to complain, right? I know when I was a kid, if I fell and got hurt, a boo-boo, as you say when you're a kid, my dad would tell me, walk it off, you'll be all right, get up, dust it off, and just walk it off, and we hear, things like, real men don't cry and things like that. And, we see in the movies, the cool guy is always the guy that all this crazy shit happens to him, but he's like totally unfazed and just cool as a cute, James Bond status, and the reality is that life, although sometimes it can feel like a movie, it's actually not a movie. It's just real shit happening. People have real emotions that they're trying to deal with, things that they're trying to work through. And in my opinion, it's okay to acknowledge that, hey, you know what, I'm not feeling so good right now. Or, hey, you know what, I'm working through some shit. Or, hey, you know what, this particular thing that you did made me feel not so great, right? Now, let's take that one because that's something that I think happens in a lot of people's lives. Anytime, especially somebody who you're close to, let's say that they step over the bounds, they did something that you weren't a fan of, right? That maybe it rubbed you the wrong way, or maybe it showed you a side of them that you hadn't seen before, and it made you feel uncomfortable, or it could be limitless other scenarios. But just to give those as a few examples, it sometimes can be difficult to approach somebody and let them know, hey, look, when you did X, Y, and Z, it made me feel like A, B, and C, and I didn't appreciate that. Or going forward, that's not how this relationship is going to operate, right? Now, that person who you're telling that to, or some might say telling off, it's a very emotionally mature person if they're able to be like, hey, you know what, my bad, accept responsibility, and then, hey, you know what, I'll try to be better. If you've had somebody like that in your life, keep them around, because emotionally mature and secure people like that are pretty rare, in my opinion. But most often, what you'll get is somebody will become defensive to that. Oh, well, I did it because of blah, 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 or well, you did the blah, 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 right? And they want to turn the finger back and point it at you, or, whatever, any number of defensive strategies, so to speak, right? So this is a form of, like I said, gaslighting you into thinking that your gripes or complaints, for lack of a better word, are unjustified. Okay. Now, let's say that person, let's say that they've like stood you up 3 times in a row. You guys have made plans to hang out. They've, every time they've ghosted you or had some kind of dumb bullshit reason, like, oh, I'm doing this or that. Then you see them like commenting on everyone's social media or something like that, right? So let's say, that's a relatively minor example, but it does show their intent in the relationship. If after so many times of trying to hang out with somebody, the feelings just don't seem reciprocated, right? So you're going to give them one final kind of, hey, look, man, or hey, look, girl, or whatever. When you've the last few times made plans with me and then dropped out, last second, it made me feel like you have kind of given up on our relationship, or made me feel like you don't really take our relationship seriously or value it very much. That person most likely is going to give you excuses, right? Oh, well, I had to do this, I had to do that, right? So in that case, you're dealing with an excuse giver, right? It's not so much that they're turning the finger around and pointing at you, it's that they're making up all these reasons of external factors why it didn't happen, right? So what you want to do in that type of situation is pretty simple, honestly. You just want to be like, look, this is how it made me feel. Take it for what it is. And this goes for any type of situation where it's kind of like a more minor thing, right? Take it for what it is. This is how it made me feel. You either respect that or you don't, right? Now, going forward with that person, you want to definitely limit the amount of energy that you put into that relationship, obviously, right? So, that's a pretty simple example. Let's take a more extreme example. Let's say that somebody's in an abusive relationship. Let's say that it's verbally abusive, because we don't need to get too dark here, right? But it could apply for other types of abuse as well. So, in that type of situation where somebody's verbally abusive, they're almost always going to be a gaslighter as well. And probably they're going to be like a professional gaslighter because they've gotten to the point where you're in a fully on relationship and, they're essentially doing whatever it takes to make themselves look like less bad than they do by verbally abusing that person, right? And they're going to go to great lengths to make it seem like it's the other person's fault, right? So let's say that the person who's being abused goes to the person who is doing the abusing, hey, look, man, hey, look, whoever, whenever you talk to me like that, it makes me feel like you're, talking down to me. It makes me feel like you think I'm less of a person or I'm less important, right? That person's going to, then respond with some type of gaslighting, usually, right? If they're the type of person who's emotionally immature enough to get to verbally abuse somebody, they're definitely also probably going to gaslight you or gaslight that person. So they might respond with something like, well, you did this and you did that, right, to deserve it, okay? In that type of scenario, your response should be, would be, in my opinion, if it were me, would be something along the lines of like, look, it is what it is. I told you how it makes me feel, okay? And nothing that I have done or could do can force you to behave in that way. Your behavior, your actions are your choice, not mine, okay? And then it would probably be best to get out of that relationship at that point in time. But that's a whole nother topic. I mean, you basically just want to lay down the law, put down some boundaries, and preferably get yourself out of the situation, right? But a lot of times people will successfully be able to gaslight people. That's why they say that people who grew up in abusive homes are more likely to be in abusive relationships later on. And people who have been in one abusive relationship tend to find somebody else that is also, going to be complicit in their abuse, and part of their abuse. So, it's a cycle, right? And in order to break that cycle for people, and I wasn't necessarily trying to get into this whole thing about abuse, but it's a good example. In order to break that cycle, you have to be able to identify the gaslighting, right? Realize when somebody is blaming you for stuff that's not your fault, okay? You want to be able to identify after you identified that you're being gaslighted, I guess I should have looked up what the conjugation of that is. After you've determined the gaslighting is happening, then you want to determine what the real problem is, right? Because you're not the problem, okay? Their actions are the problem. Their way that they're talking to you, or their, character or emotional status or whatever it is that is the actual problem, okay? Now, once you've determined the problem, then it's essentially like a measuring. You need to gauge and measure how serious is that problem. Can you live with it? Do you think that person's going to be able to improve and get better? Or do you think this is just who they are, right? And if you think it's who they are, then you need to make the call whether or not you're going to be able to live with them like that for the rest of your lives, right? Whether it's a romantic relationship or like a friend, just, could be a platonic relationship. But, if they're somebody who pops off on you every once in a while and treats you like shit, you need to let them know, hey, look, that's not cool. I don't accept that. I have higher standards than that. And this is how it's going to be moving forward, right? And if they push back, then you're going to want to determine, look, hey, these are the boundaries. You're responsible for your actions. I'm not. And, set those boundaries. This is not happening anymore moving forward, right? So, one of the things I think that doesn't really necessarily help this propensity that we all have to, not all of us, but many people have to allow other people to sort of gaslight us is, nowadays, what is fact and what is fiction has been blurred a lot. What is objective and what is subjective has been blurred a lot. Like people will be like, oh, well, X, Y, and Z. Let's take I don't want to get political, but like climate change. It's happening. Sorry if you're listening to this podcast and you think that it's not. Sorry, but it's real. So let's take that for an example. So like somebody will say like, yeah, climate the climate is changing over time, and it may or may not be entirely due to humans, but we're certainly not having a positive reaction or a positive influence on the climate. And then somebody else is like, no, the climate's not changing, right? So some people will see that as like, oh, those people just have two different opinions, right? But one of them is actually rooted in science. Like 99.999% of the world's scientists agree with one person. And then the other person is just like their feelings. Like they politically probably, their tribe doesn't believe that this is happening. And so that's their opinion. But their opinion doesn't necessarily mean that it's fact, right? We all know this, okay? So it's important to realize, you can be objective and correct, or you can be subjective and correct, right? You could be subjective and wrong, or you can also be objective and wrong about what your conclusions are, right? So there's, combinations and variations of all those. So, it's okay. It's okay, basically, is what my main message here is. That it's okay to acknowledge when you're hurting, when you're in pain, when something's wrong, right? And to have the mental fortitude and the courage and the confidence to stand up, do the right thing, stand up for yourself, stand up for what's right, and let that person who's trying to gaslight you know, hey, this isn't the way it is. And it's also important to point out, you don't have to both agree. Like after you set them straight, like, hey, actually, you're gaslighting me right now, blah, blah, blah. Most people, like I said, oh, no, get defensive, It's okay. They don't have to agree with you, right? Just like they don't have to agree. They don't have to agree with you, just like you don't have to agree with them, right? So it's important to point that out because oftentimes you won't reach agreement, right? Like those climate change people, they're not going to reach an agreement, even though one of them's right and one of them thinks that they're right because they have an opinion. They're not going to reach a conclusion because they're in two totally different realities, right? And that's a tough thing to accept sometimes, that people can be just so far off from where each other are. You can have so many things in common too and have so much common ground, but on like certain key elements, you can be so far off so as that you're in like different universes almost. So it can be a tough thing to really reconcile sometimes. Like, hey, how can I have so much in common with this person? We've shared like so many good times together, stuff like that, but they're just not seeing the reality of the situation here. They have their own opinion, but it's based on subjectivity and they're incorrect. Whereas my opinion is based on objectivity and I'm obviously correct, right? Especially if they're trying to tell you how you feel about something. That's one of my favorites. Or what you think about something. Oh, well, you think this or you feel that. Really? Like, tell me how I think and how I feel, please. So that's one of my favorite ones, But yeah, I think it's important to realize that you don't have to both agree. And the next step from there is just to move on, right? If it's somebody who you still want to be cool with, it's in that scenario, it's best to just kind of like maybe laugh it off a little bit, like, kind of agree to disagree a little bit, unless it's about something that's like core to your belief and ideology and who you are. Obviously, it's not as easy to just shrug that off. But if it's a more minor thing and you feel like, hey, maybe they can work on it. They're not really seeing where I'm coming from right now. I said my piece. I got it out there. I said what I needed to say. Maybe some of it sunk in with them, but now it's probably best to just like move on and focus on more important things or more enjoyable things. So that's my advice to you guys. If there's something that's bothering you about somebody or with somebody or having to do with somebody and you're having a hard time bringing it up, wait for a moment to make it easier to bring it up. You can wait for a moment where you feel like they're saying something or prescribing something to you or your beliefs or your opinions or actions or whatever that you feel like is inaccurate. Point out to them how it's inaccurate and what the reality is, and take it from there based on what their reaction is, right? Like I said, if they're defensive, and they just aren't getting it and they won't accept the reality, you can just kind of like make a joke, brush it off, change the topic, move on if it's not a big deal, and if they are emotionally mature and they're like, hey, you know what? I appreciate you sharing that with me, that I didn't mean to make you feel like that or blah, 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 whatever. Like, definitely try to keep that person in your life, first of all, because those people are very rare. And second of all, make sure to thank them, like, hey, thank you. I appreciate that you took the time and the opportunity to understand where I'm coming from, and really nourish and cherish that relationship because it's probably going to be a special one going forward. Now, if when you have that moment of acknowledging, like, hey, you're gaslighting me. You don't have to say that exactly, but hey, look, when you said X, Y, and Z, it made me feel like that, and that's not actually how I want to feel, or that's not how I feel, or that's not what I said, or that's not what I did. Whatever it is that they're thinking or saying or doing, or whatever that's not in alignment with reality, that's the perfect time to bring it up, that you have this sort of friction with this person, because that's when it's fresh on both of your minds, right? You don't want to bring up like a fight from yesterday today, right? Because it's not fresh on your mind anymore. You might not remember all the little contexts and idiosyncrasies and little things that each of you said. So that would be my advice, is just bring it up in the moment. Let them know how you feel. Realize it's okay to feel how you're feeling. It's okay to be in pain. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to have your feelings hurt. And you know, it's not complaining. And then take it from there. Hopefully they have a good reaction, and hopefully you have a good reaction. If they don't have a good reaction, try to keep things chill, try to keep things, de-escalate things, and then you can make a determination whether it's time for you to move on from that person, or if it's time to invest more and do more of the hard work to get them to get past that hurdle that they're experiencing. So hope this episode was helpful for you guys. I think it was an interesting one for me, because I'm kind of going through some of this stuff in my life, and so it was something that was really on my mind a lot. So yeah, that's about it for this episode of the Jake Fletcher Show, and I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys are subscribed to the channel. Smash the like button, follow us, subscribe to us, like our thing on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to. Follow me on Instagram at jake.miami. And for all your real estate needs all around the world, I have got you guys covered. Reach out to me. My contact information is below. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Until then, sell smart, buy bold. Peace.